Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of One for the Music. We are joined by composer and music producer Paul McGeechan. Great to have you here, Paul. How are you today?
Thanks for the invite. Yeah, all good. Thanks. Yeah.
Great, great. So to start this all off, I would like to ask you to shortly introduce yourself and give us a bit of a background on your music career.
Okay, no problem. I I suppose I entered into the music industry properly in 1982. I started school bands, and then we were very fortunate to get a record deal in a band called Friends Again. And I think that was late 1982, if
Mhm.
memory serves right. And that band lasted for maybe a year, 2 years. We did an album. We toured around Britain, some of Europe, and so forth. And then when that band finished, I started another band with some of the members of that group, and we formed a band called Love and Money. And Love and Money ran for about 10 years. We released, well, 4 albums at that point, toured the world extensively, and so forth over that 10-year period. Quite successful with our second record, Strange Kind of Love. And it was produced by a guy called Gary Katz, who did all the Steely Dan records and many others. And then when Love and Money split up, I kind of got back into what first uh, made me interested in music, and that was production and engineering. So I opened a studio and I kind of developed studios over the next few years. And I think over the last 20, 25 years, I've worked on maybe five or 600 albums. So quite a lot of work as an engineer and producer. And now my band Love Money reformed a number of years ago. I think about 8 years ago. We did a few shows and we did another record, and that kind of got me interested in writing my own material again. So I now have a project called Starless, and I released the first Starless album 2016. The second came out May this year, and I'm working on the third just now.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank
So,
you.
how do you view your position within the music industry as a producer, songwriter, or performing artist?
So, do you mean do I see myself as one of those, or?
Like, how do you view your current position in the music
Or
industry?
okay, so I suppose, like quite a lot of people in the music industry, have got various hats. I suppose. Obviously, I'm a lecturer at UWS, and I have been a member of staff now for 20 years at UWS. And as you most likely know, although the module you're currently on isn't a production module, but most of the modules that I lecture and teach on are production-based modules. So I'm a lecturer. I do see myself as a composer and as a producer as well. And so that's one of the things that interested me in the project that I'm doing currently, Starless, because it allows me to compose. I'm producing it myself, so it gives me control. It is a collaborative project, but it kind of gives me the control that I'm interested in as a producer. But I suppose first, I'm making music as a composer, producer, and of course as an educator as well.
Okay. I mean, you're in the industry for such a long time now. What I'd be interested in is what major changes did you notice during that time and how did you adapt to them?
Ah, right. So I suppose one of my interests also is technology. I kind of very much into music technology. And it kind of goes without saying that's been one of the big things that has changed, especially since I entered the industry. When I started in the music industry, the recording would be tape based and analog, mainly analog consoles at that point. And now I predominantly work with digital audio workstations, although I do work with tape sometimes. Um, and my main digital audio workstation is Pro Tools. So that was a big change for me, and I've been using Pro Tools since its onset. Really, I think I started at version 3, and my memory fails me, but it's over 20 years anyway, however long that's been around. So that was a big focus for me. One of my friends owned a company called MediaSpec, and MediaSpec still supply a lot of the universities, colleges, industry people like BBC, STV, with Pro Tools and other equipment. And they asked me to get involved in the training side of Pro Tools, so teaching people how to use that. And that's really that was quite early on in my education background. I also worked at Perth College teaching there as well. But I really embraced the digital technology at an early age, and that was one, a source of interest,
Mhm.
two, a source of finance, because it was, I could work teaching that and learn how to use the technology. And also as a production tool, it really interested me because I see a digital audio workstation as an extension of an instrument, essentially. So it allowed me to do a lot of things that I couldn't afford to do before, in essence, because as you can see, there's a few keyboards behind me and so forth. Keyboards in the 80s were very expensive. I bought a keyboard called a Jupiter 8, and that was £4,700 in 1983. So it gives you an idea of the cost.
Yeah.
And when Pro Tools and other digital audio workstations arrived, it let you have, although it was still expensive at the time, it let you have uh, the ability to make records at home, essentially. So that was a big change for me. And I think that is one of, we have the technology for recording. We also have technology for distribution, which is another change in my lifetime, of course. And I think there's a lot of, it's an interesting topic because there's advantages and disadvantages to both. Some people like working on tape, some people like the freedom digital technology gives you, some people like Spotify for distribution, some don't. We could spend quite a lot of time, I think, discussing those areas. But yeah, so I suppose the digital areas are the biggest changes, whether it's distribution, recording, consumption, all these different areas.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, talking about changes, are there any changes that you would make to the current music industry?
Ooh, that's a good. Yeah, I'd make everyone buy my records. Only joking. It's an interesting point. There's discussions going on, obviously, as I'm sure you're aware at the moment, around. There's a conversation around digital platforms like Spotify saying, are the writers and artists getting the percentage of finance that they should? I think that's an interesting conversation. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. But I would agree in that sense that I think the financial reward for digital distribution isn't what it could be at this point. So that's an interesting conversation. And I think if that's one thing I had control of, I would make that fairer on the artist from the artist's point of view.
Okay. Um, Now I would like to go a bit deeper into your work as a music producer.
Sure.
So first off, what part or which aspect of music production interests you the most, and why?
And a good question. Well, so one of the parts that really interests me, as I mentioned, is the kind of use of technology and that kind of thing. And I think with my first Starless project, that was part of the interest for me was, as I said, it's a collaboration. Some material I write myself, some material from other artists that I've worked with, and other artists that I've worked with taking part in the project. And using the technology to realize that was part of the kind of goal. But also, as a producer, there's so many different types of producing. I think that's what you're alluding to as well. But I'm interested in the song, I'm interested in the performance, and I'm interested in the overall sound. In this particular project, it has a focus, although it's collaborative, it has a focus. And part of that focus is the orchestration. And it's a trilogy. So I've got one, I'm working on the third record at the moment, and they've got a continuous theme, but with each record within those three records, there's a slight change. So the third album is most likely going to be slightly more guitar and piano based than the second one was, and so forth. So I'm always looking at the instrumentation, the artists I'm involved with. But production as an overall, technology is the big focus for me. But as I mentioned earlier on, technology is the kind of realizer in the instrument in itself. And what I'm using the technology for is allow me to communicate in one sense with musicians. I'm not trained, so I can't read music. So I'm relying heavily on digital audio workstations, whether it be Pro Tools, Logic, or whatever, to realize some of my string arrangements. I work with an arranger. He can take the MIDI files or whatever I give to them, and then use that in Sibelius or something, and then they can go to the orchestra. So I'm using it as a form of communication as well as production. And I just find it a great way of working with ideas, and chopping things up and working with musicians, getting great performances, but having some fun. Yeah. Hope
Yeah,
that
I
answers
think
it.
that's a great approach to it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So coming from like the music that you make,
Yeah.
what genre do you focus on?
Ooh. Now that's a good question. I find that difficult to. I don't know if I could say what music my genre is, to be quite honest. But I mean, I don't particularly focus on any one thing when I'm working on my own music. It's kind of funny. People used to say in the 80s, I was in a band called Love and Money, Jim Prime was in Deacon Blue, and there was lots of Scottish bands about, and we all knew each other. But you didn't really pay a lot of attention to what the other bands were doing. You were too busy involved in what you're doing yourself. And it's a wee bit like that in this project for me. I listen to music all the time. Um, and it can really drastically vary. Sometimes I'm listening to particular things for references and maybe in a technical approach, or how they're arranged, or how they're produced, or how the overall sound. Uh, so I don't know. I don't feel as though I can answer that question properly of what genre would influence me, because I listen to all sorts of different music.
That's okay. Many people like just go with the flow and just
Yeah.
choose whatever's.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I've mentioned this to you before, just in conversation. I still like listening to the radio. And I like listening to the afternoon show on Radio Scotland. I like Six Music. I hear a lot of things on Six Music that I wouldn't pick up on unless someone was playing them, and I think, oh, that's good, or I might not like something. But that kind of broadens my horizons in that sense. And Radio Scotland might do that as well, where they'll have a discussion around a book, or a film, or a play, or an album, and it's things that I might not find out about if I was just using search engines or whatever. So I like radio for that still, because I'll hear something that I wouldn't seek out, if you know what I mean. And I think Six Music's a great supporter of a lot of new music, as Radio Scotland is. So I like hearing a combination of new music. I buy vinyl a lot, but most of the vinyl I buy tends to be retro in a sense. Artists I've known for years, although I'm now signed to Last Night from Glasgow, and that label, you can sign up to them, you get so many albums per year, and that always brings you new music to listen to, again, things that you might not necessarily seek out. So I'm sure people do that with Spotify and playlists and all that kind of thing, that will take them one direction or another. And I think it's really good, because it just lets you hear things that you may otherwise not get to listen to.
Yeah, great. I mean, you're very successful in what you do, and you've made your way in the music industry. What I would like to know, if someone would like to pursue a career in the music industry, either be it as a producer, as a performing artist, from your perspective, what advice would you give to this person?
Good question. Well, I mean, it's one of the things we talk at university about as well, and it's like, whether that's an application for university, or anything within the music industry, I think it's being engaged as much as you can be. It's if you're interested in production, then get involved in your own things, and you know get involved in gigs. I'm sure you all do anyway, but I think that's when I started out in the music industry, I was fortunate that one of our friends had a building like this, only bigger, and we were able to rehearse in that, without a cost. And we were at school, and we just used to hang out. So we played every day. We maybe rehearsed 5-6 days a week, and we did that for a year until we got a record company. Sorry, a record contract. But if I reflect on that point, there was an awful lot of Scottish bands getting signed at that time. Scotland was a focus. We've talked about Manchester and other places, but at that particular time in the early 80s, there was a big focus around Scotland. And people said, oh, yeah, you were very lucky to get a record contract. Now, we were very lucky to get a record contract because there were so many bands. But when the luck came around, we'd practice and rehearse and so forth for so long. I'm not saying we were ready, but we're close to it, if you know what I mean. So there was luck involved, but there was also kind of, we didn't see it as work. That's the thing. You didn't see it as, rehearsing and writing songs as work. It was just, that's what we did. And I think that's the biggest thing for any musician or engineer or producer, is just get involved in as many opportunities you can. I was talking to my son, eldest son, the other day, who studied English and then did the MA sound production at UWS. And there's a position came up that I knew wasn't exactly what he was looking for, but it might be an opportunity if you got that position to get to into the area you want. And I was saying that that's one of the things that sometimes it's just seizing those opportunities, but just getting involved as much as you can, I think, is the thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Just getting engaged and using your opportunities.
Yeah.
So, when you're making your music, and
Sure.
what DAW do you recommend people use?
Well, it's Pro Tools is my main one, and I think with music technology, if I go back again, I started with a program called Pro 24, which was around about 1986, I think. And that was a forerunner to a program called Cubase. Then used that for a long time. I got into Pro Tools very early on, and I've stuck with that. But I do use Logic sometimes, pardon me. Another great program, of course, is Ableton. There's so many great programs out now, and they've all got maybe something that they're particularly good at, like Ableton's superb at particular things, Logic's great at other things, Pro Tools gets its benefit. I think, and there's a lot of really good free DAWs as well now. You don't have to spend a lot of money and so forth. And obviously with the COVID situation, lots of companies are offering 90-day trials and all that kind of thing. I think, I mean, if you're looking at, it depends what part of the industry you're looking at, but if you look at Avid's Pro Tools, for example, BBC, STV, Savalas and Glasgow, they're all using it for post-production. Music studios are using it, writers are using it. So it's quite varied. It's got a big cross section. If you look at Ableton, that's a slightly different area. Logic, a lot of composers are using. But I think, if you're starting out, it's good to try different things. A lot of people now are using Pro Tools and Ableton to, maybe Ableton to do some, programming and that kind of thing, and then Pro Tools to capture the audio. But I think we're at the stage that all the DAWs are fantastic. As I say, I work in a particular way, and in my recording there's a lot of audio involved. So I got into Pro Tools, I suppose, because it was the first and really only program at the time that was a direct replacement for tape, that you could just record a band as if you were with a tape machine, you could just do that. So that element of it's still quite important to me. And, the studios I use when I go to Prague to record the orchestra, they're using Pro Tools and so forth. But, they're all good. There's lots of great DAWs out there.
Okay. Now that we're talking a bit about like the technical equipment side of things, I can tell you've got quite a selection of keyboards in your room.
Yeah, I usually say, what instrument do you think I play? Yeah, I've got a few keyboards yet.
So which one is your favorite?
Ooh, right. Well, that one there, I don't know if you can see it, but it's called a Korg. It's got a great name, though it hasn't. All synthesizers are just numbers and names. It's called a Korg PS 3200. There was 100 of them made. They were made by hand, and I've owned 5 of them. That's the 5th one I've owned. And it was made in 1979, I think. And it's polyphonic, and it's programmable, and it's a modular synth, so it's quite an unusual combination. So they're quite sought after. They've got a particular sound. And then my other favorite is a Roland Jupiter 8. So that's another great keyboard I've used all my career. And I like playing about with all the modular stuff and all that as well. But my kind of go-to would be that and the Jupiter 8 if I had to choose a synthesizer. Yeah.
Okay, nice. That's a great choice.
Cool.
So, I'm thinking that you've been making projects with that Korg synthesizer.
Yes.
But What has been the most fun and or best project that you worked on so far?
Ooh. Well, I've worked on so many. I think most projects you go to, you'll get something. I mean, one of the things that I've ended up working on an awful lot of traditional Scottish music, Gaelic music, folk music, and that's not my background at all, you know. And I worked with a band called Capercaillie, and because I worked with them, lots of other traditional bands that kind of held them up as, you know, one of the best bands, all came to me to start working on their records. And then I got really interested in that kind of music. And I loved the kind of sound of Gaelic voice. And although I don't understand the language, and I've used quite a lot of Gaelic song on my own work as well now. Uh, so I think you know, if you're into music, there's always something that'll draw you. You know, there's always something that you can really latch onto and make a project fun. I think again, getting back to your career question, it's one of the things, if you can do something that you really enjoy, it makes it doesn't seem like a job, you know. It's just it's all fun for the most part, anyway. But yeah, each project brings a new experience. And the first Starless record, I worked with singer Paul Buchanan, who was in a band called the Blue Nile, who's one of my favourite all-time bands, and he's one of my all-time favourite singers. So to get the opportunity to work with people like that, it's extraordinary, you know. So each project's got its merits. I'm enjoying working on the Starless projects just now, so I suppose that's where my focus is. But if something else came in, then, you know, I'll hopefully do that as well.
Okay, so is there, apart from that one, is there any other specific artist or band that you would like to work with?
Yes. I would love to work with a singer called Elizabeth Fraser, Liz Fraser from the Cocteau Twins. Don't think that will ever happen. I have asked her, but I've not managed to get to yet. So, yeah, there's a few. I mean, for the Starless project, because it's collaborative, I'm always sending out feelers to artists. You know, sometimes you get a response of yes, sometimes you don't get a response at all. And sometimes, you know, the timing doesn't work out. And things like that. So there's lots of different areas. But to be quite honest, I'm not the most confident person in that sense. And I know a lot of musicians aren't, but you've just got to go for it.
Just try it, yeah.
And for me, again, with the first Starless record, when I asked Paul Buchanan to sing on the record, a 3-month period passed between me asking him and him agreeing to do it. And I thought, you know, he wasn't going to return my emails or calls. And it was just fantastic when he did it. But the other thing about that is when someone like that joins your project, it makes other people pay attention. You know, that's not the reason I asked him. I asked him because I loved his voice. But once he agreed to do it, other people are like, oh, he's doing it. So, you know, there might be more in agreement to do it. So it's kind of not networking, but you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, Liz Fraser would be the other one that I would, one of the other people that I would really love to work with. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Awesome. So, seeing as collaboration is like such a huge part of being a producer, what do
Yeah.
you view as the important things to keep your eye out when collaborating?
Well, I mean, I think collaboration and also production, I think one of the important things a producer has to do, hopefully, is put the artist at ease. And that's the same when you're working with someone, whether you're the producer or you're just collaborating. Uh, my experiences for early career recording was it could be quite intimidating. You know, you go into a big studio, it costs lots of money. Usually the producer would be, you know, very well respected and have a huge catalogue of previous work. And we were very young musicians and it just got quite scary. So, and then later on, I worked with, I mentioned I worked with a producer, Gary Katz. And when people were interviewing him and asking what his approach about production was, he used to say, I'm a coach. He referred to himself as a coach. And what he was talking about really was make whatever it took to get the right setting in the studio or atmosphere or whatever, but get the best from the performers or musicians or co-writers or whatever it is. So I think that's an important thing, is maybe getting to know people and making them relaxed, whatever that may take. And I was talking about this the other day with MA songwriters that, you know, with COVID, there's a lot of collaboration going on remotely. And a lot of my Starless project before COVID was all remote anyway, because working with singers and so forth. And there's advantages and disadvantages, of course, but some singers like working in their home and they're not under the spotlight and they've got time to do their vocals and try things and so forth. So that's an advantage for some people. Other people, you have to get them in the studio, else they just won't ever deliver anything. So I think it's people, it's about people and people's skills and getting to know people to get the performance and support them, I think is an important thing.
Yeah, like you said, like the atmosphere is
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah, I remember I've watched the classic albums a few times. There was one in Fleetwood Mac, and they were talking to the producer that did. I'm trying to remember the song. One of the songs on the album, it's just piano and vocal. And to get the atmosphere right, they hired a hall, a grand piano in it, they put roses on it, and just made it like a special feeling for the performance and so forth to capture, you know, so set the musician at ease and make a nice atmosphere around that. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the atmosphere needs to be right, but for you as a producer,
Sure.
how do you approach like asking artists to make changes or rearrangements within their work?
Well, you always, again, you're always trying to be encouraging and supportive. So rather than saying, "Oh, that doesn't work," you know, I might say, "Well, have you tried this, or maybe try something else, or maybe that section would be better here." One example that springs to mind was I was working with an artist and they had a track that I thought was really strong and might get radio play. But my feeling was it was a bit long. And I've got the experience of that from an artist point of view and being in a band with where the A&R person would say, "I like that song, but you need to edit it for a single." And you'd be like, "You can't edit that," and you'd be very precious. So you didn't want them to edit it. So then I've become the producer, so I'm on the other side of it. And I was working with an artist and she had a track that was really good. And I said, "I think that'd be a good radio track, but it's too long." And I said, "Maybe we could edit one of the verses." It kind of went verse, verse, chorus, verse, middle eight, chorus kind of thing. And I was suggesting losing the second verse. And she didn't want to do that. And so I contacted a couple of people that I knew in radio, played them the song. I said, "Would you play this?" They said, "Oh, I really like that, but it's too long. Do you want to do a radio edit?" And I said, "That's what, okay, fine." So I went back to the artist and said, "A couple of radio stations have said they'll play it, but not unless you edit it." So after due consideration, the artist came back to me and said, "Right." I said, "Well, what about having a radio edit version, but the long version on the album?" And that was the compromise. So that's what we did. But the point I was illustrating was, without the edit, we wouldn't have got any radio play. So it's compromising the artist's work because there was a whole narrative that she wanted to keep. And I totally understand that from an artistic point of view. But what I'm also, and what part of my job was in that particular case was, well, that's fine. But what we're trying to do is get to an audience that you don't have as yet. Oh, sorry. An audience you don't have yet. And unless we get radio and other things to support that, then you won't get to that audience. So compromise, so taking someone through that compromise, I think, you know, again, being supportive, but all I did in that particular case was got a couple of emails from radio saying that they would play it, but not in its current, not in its current form. We needed to edit it. So that was just one example.
So, seeing as like we're talking about collaboration and everything, are you working on anything right now?
Again, sorry to keep repeating, but just the Starless project in a moment. When COVID happened, it was unusual because obviously we were still teaching. We were into the latter part of trimester 2, so a lot of my time was focused about going online teaching, and then the weather was really good, and I found myself on computers all day, and it kind of threw me away from wanting to do music on computers, I must admit. So spent a lot of time outside. And also that's partly why I've got a lot of this old stuff. I just fiddle about with it without being on a computer, and I like doing that, sometimes getting away from computers because we're using them for work all the time. I'm just getting back into working on the Stylus project. I took some time just out, as I say, from working in the studio, but that's what I'm working on just now. So where I am with that is sending song ideas out to people to collaborate on. And I'm just about to do some further recording. So I've got maybe 5 songs that people co-writing with people at the moment. So that's the kind of stage of collaboration, and also a couple of musicians playing on this record at the moment. And the previous records, I tend to play most of it myself. I've got a couple of bass players that play with me and a drummer that plays occasionally, but a lot of the first 2 albums is just, it's all programmed. Whereas this album variation, I think, will have more musicians on it through choice, but that was a choice thing. Again, you getting back to your questions earlier about working as a producer or technologist, I kind of like programming things because it gives me the control.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to go a bit deeper into your progress as a musician, as a producer, perhaps. So,
Sure.
um, what has been the best advice you've been given in regard to music?
In regard to, sorry?
To music
To music.
in general, yeah.
Well, I can tell you the worst advice I got easily. After my first record came out, I thought I'm going to learn to play the piano. Although I did play the piano, but I thought I'll go for lessons. And the music teacher, after one lesson, said, "Don't waste your time nor mine." So she was saying to me, I wouldn't have a career in music. And it's different now. When I entered the music industry, there was very little support in that sense. There was no college courses, there was no university college courses or anything like that. And it was very much regimented. If you're in a punk band or whatever, that's different. But I just mean the industry was very much registry, people that played and had training and all that, and I hadn't. So I remembered that. And that's something that it stuck with me because there was more discouragement than there was encouragement when I was a young person. My father said to me when I got offered a record contract, my mum wanted me to finish my electronics studying that I was doing. And my dad took me aside and said, go and do music. He said, because you can go back to electronics at any point. And he was absolutely right. And it was great advice. But yeah, I mean, giving good advice, that's a difficult one. It's easier for me to remember the bad advice. But as I say, that Gary Katz thing of the coach, that stuck with me also. Just maybe that stuck with me in a way of thinking of how to work with people and treat people. And, music's, we all get into music because a love of music and, the fun of it. You're not entering the music industry really because you think it's going to be a tough job. You're entering it because you're so passionate about music and so forth. And I think, if anything, there's maybe a piece of advice that, keep your passion. Don't let things go wrong. And we also maybe get we overcomplicate things sometimes and read things where there isn't a problem. So keeping an open mind, I think, is and again, if you're interested in collaboration, songwriting, so forth, an open mind's really useful as well. As I say, I'm sure a lot of musicians are like me. I'm quite a shy person. I shared something with ME songwriters the other day, and it was me singing an idea for a song. No one ever hears me sing, so that was me kind of reluctantly playing that to students. So I think your personality comes into it, and maybe it doesn't change, but I think it's just trying things, try not to be too scared of things, take advice, try and take advice. And if the advice doesn't seem positive and you don't agree with it, then just discard it.
All right. So the final question
Yeah,
is, what do you know? Sorry, I need to get the question right.
that's okay, no problem.
What are the things you know today that you wish you knew when you began?
That's a, well, that's a good question. Trying to think about that. I think I could have been less precious about certain things as I'm talking about. We're talking about radio edits and that kind of thing there, where you have a particular opinion and you're stuck in that opinion. The band I was in, Love and Money, had a reputation for being difficult. I don't think we were difficult. We were opinionated. We had very strong ideas, but some people thought we were difficult. If I would change anything and maybe go back and change that, I must admit, I kind of look at my career and I don't think there's an awful lot I would change. You could make more money. You can always make more money, but I did pretty good. Bands lasting for 10 years, that's a long time. I kind of look at my career pretty happily. I'm trying to think of things that I would change. As I say, maybe from other people's perspective, maybe Love and Money weren't the easiest band to work with. I don't know. And if that's the case, then maybe I'd change that. But work-wise, really enjoyed most of the work I've done through all the different artists I've worked with, the bands I've been in and so forth. Yeah, there's one thing I would change. So I now work with singer Chris Thompson. He was in a band called The Beaters. He was in Friends Again with me, first band. And when Friends Again split up, the rest of us started Love and Money. And I think, looking back on that, that was a relatively, maybe a cruel thing to do, leave him by himself. So maybe we'd have let him down more gently than just leaving the band. There you go. There's one thing.
Okay. So then, thank you very much, Paul, for taking your time, being so open and answering all our questions.
No problem.
I think it was very, very lovely talking to you and getting an insight on what you do musically, as a performing artist, as a producer, as a composer, and the advice you could give out. That's great.
Well, thank you both for your time. I enjoyed that. So hope you get something out of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.